there's nothing that's going to stop China's technological development. It's just they're moving forward. Huawei, almost got killed, the handset business with the U.S. sanctions. Guess what? It's now come back to the best-selling handset in China. The weaponization of the dollar is a very real thing. It's not just in the instance of Russia. I was just in Zimbabwe a few weeks.
Ever wondered if the headlines about China's economic collapse are just media hype? Let's sift through the noise with Professor Keyu Jin, an acclaimed economist from the London School of Economics, whose insights into China's economic playbook have been reshaping international perceptions. With her unique perspective, having both lived through China's economic transformation and studied its intricacies at Harvard, Professor Jin will guide us through the myths and realities. Don't miss out on this enlightening journey. Hit that subscribe button to stay informed on global economic trends and to join us in challenging conventional narratives.
Do you see China becoming more like the rest of the world? Do you see a stopping point in that? Do you see great cultural gaps between China and the countries that it would like to economically emulate?
I think it is a cycle of renewal in the sense that the Chinese new generation, than just working hours. They're no longer the generation like the Foxconn workers who opted for 3 shifts a night and just so eager to earn an additional yuan. They like to work hard. They're entrepreneurial, but they also like to spend. And in that sense, maybe that is not such a bad thing, right? Because remember globalization and the rise of China in the 2000s, this massive influx of products, cheap and huge amount of scale. The Chinese people worked so hard and they learned so fast. That was undeniably a shock to the world. Now, a lot of these jobs are passed down to other countries, passing the baton back, to other countries that also have a chance to emerge and develop through manufacturing. And so China's focus has totally shifted. It's no longer about the traditional manufacturing steel. China's new agenda is emerging strategic new sectors like EVs, like renewables, like high techs and critical technologies. And so now, one interesting thing I have to say is that despite all that is happening, the lower wages, moving to other countries, we don't really see in the newspapers, in the Chinese newspapers, about Vietnamese stealing Chinese jobs, or with this bitterness, right? What do the Chinese do? They say, well, this is just a natural cycle. Let's try to upgrade on the value chain. Let's invest in other sectors, and let's try to climb up and shift to other sectors. So the mentality is still very different. But back to the new generation, it's a good thing because they have, they're going to start spending. They also love traveling and seeing the world. And so I think some of the old controversies are no longer really that relevant anymore. But they also love to transform the domestic economic landscape. Post-80s, Manor Coffee, it's a coffee shop, hundreds of stores within 3 years trying to kind of compete with Starbucks. So I think the attitude is pretty positive with the new generation.
As I probably don't need to tell quite a lot of our guests, there was a period, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, where suddenly China was declared uninvestable. And there'd been a sweeping series of regulatory changes that seemed to come out of nowhere, and funds were pulling their money out at a rate of knots. How is it now, and how do you think it will be over the next sort of short to medium term for those looking for decent returns from China?
So before I answer that, I did want to say one more thing about the new generation,
Please.
which I think is very important, which is, I've talked about the positives, right? But there's a real challenge, which is there's a high youth unemployment, north of 25%. Who knows what the real numbers are? And I think that the building up of that anxiety, the whole families have spent so much, maybe sometimes empty their bank accounts to educate one child, have the prospect of not being able to find their first job, and that obviously brings a lot of angst, not only to the graduate, but also to the family. So I think this is something to think about. But also, this mismatch. When we talk about demographics being kind of the major thing, I'd say it's the big education skill mismatch. It's not like there are no jobs in China. There are actually 25 million additional manufacturing jobs in the next 3 years. But guess what? These young people are too educated for that. They don't want to choose that kind of jobs, even though that's what's available. So if the nation manages to resolve that issue is really one of the preconditions to actually unleash the potential of that generation.
And traditionally, and we will come back to this question of investment, but traditionally as well, graduate unemployment is politically quite destabilizing as well. It's a real challenge for government.
Absolutely.
Is it for China?
Well, I can assure you that the Chinese leaders really focus their attention on the young generation, right? Their credibility lies in the young generation's trust. Just think about how COVID ended. But they are actually actively trying to solve this problem. So examples like vastly expanding vocational training and schools, and also raising their status, and also trying to encourage companies to give internships. And there are many different measures. So they're taking it very seriously. I also do think that it has a lot to do with the economic downturn. So hopefully over time. But back to investment, very, very critical topic here. Now, look, I think U.S. investment is very, very important for the Chinese technological landscape. It's not just that China needs money. China doesn't actually need that much money. China has a huge amount of domestic saving rate. But U.S. investment or global international investors are supremely important for the innovation ecosystem. They're usually long-term, they're strategic, they can open doors. There are all kinds of benefits of having them around, and especially in China's somewhat immature, let's say, financial system that doesn't do a great job supporting small, medium-sized companies and entrepreneurs, they play a really critical role. Right. So I think having them back or keeping them there or encouraging them to take a look at China is very important. Now that said, those who want to do the work on understanding Chinese companies, doing work on the ground, they do see a lot of value and potential upside for Chinese companies currently. Still very, very good, very profitable, much, much more undervalued than it was before. And so you do also have a group of investors that are more, let's say, politically neutral, and they do price in the uncertainties about Taiwan and all the risk, but they're given the risk return calculation, they still believe that it is a good long-term bet. So you will also see that. And also the recent data have suggested that China is actually slowly coming back with the consumption growth numbers, inflation numbers, manufacturing numbers. It's probably slowly on their bottoming out over time. But we also have to remember that at this point, I believe that global capital is not only fickle, but it has a short memory span. Now, in the 1980s or 1990s, when countries like Argentina defaulted on their debt, financial penalty, financial exclusion of Argentina in the international markets were on average 3 to 5 years. In recent years, if you default on your debt, the average penalty is 3 to 6 months. And so global capital still needs to diversify. They're going to search for growth. And as we mentioned, despite what we're thinking about, Asia is still where the majority of the growth is happening. So if China can stabilize, if China's leaders can be regulatory agencies, bodies, and policies can be more transparent, stabilized, really encourage foreigners to come back and invest, and just show some stability and general pragmatism, I think there's a chance that global capital will flow back.
Thank you for joining us on this insightful journey into the heart of China's economic landscape with Professor Keyu Jin. As we've seen, the narrative of collapse doesn't capture the full story. Instead, it's one of resilience, innovation, and forward thinking. If you found this analysis both enlightening and intriguing, remember to like, share, and hit that subscribe button for more content that challenges the headlines and delves deep into global economic dynamics. Don't forget to ring the bell for notifications so you never miss out on our latest explorations into the world of economics. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep an open mind to the stories behind the numbers.